Welcome to History English Stories. Today, we bring you a true story from the past. One that's strange, powerful, and maybe a little forgotten. Listen closely, follow the subtitles, and let your English grow. One mystery at a time. They didn't scream. Not at first. When the mountain opened its mouth and breathed out the sky, the people of Pompeii didn't know they were already inside the last day of their lives. There was no thunder, no warning like stories tell, just a low tremor, like the earth sighing beneath sandals and sandals never made for fleeing. At that moment, Pompeii was alive, truly alive. The markets were open. Bakers kneaded dough. Lovers whispered in alleyways. Children chased wooden hoops across stone streets. The August sun climbed above Mount Vesuvius like it had every day before, and no one looked up to question it. Pompeii was not a city that feared the earth. It lived with it, beneath it, on top of it. Earthquakes were part of life's small ones, large ones, sometimes destructive, always forgotten. 17 years earlier, a violent quake had torn through the city. Walls collapsed, statues fell, temples cracked, but the people rebuilt. They always rebuilt. Roman engineers, masterful and proud, saw damage not as warning, but as challenge. By the year 79 AD, Pompeii was healing, beautiful again, wealthy again, a resort city for Rome's elite, a port city humming with trade, and a mosaic of gods, merchants, sailors, slaves, and senators. A place where Greek myths lined villa walls in vivid frescoes, where fountains sang in courtyards and public baths steamed with laughter and gossip. But beneath the surface, the mountain was listening. Pressure built. Gases stirred. The signs were there, if anyone had looked closely. Dogs barked without cause. Wells dried. Birds fled the trees in panicked bursts. There were even warnings from the gods, if one believed in omens. The priests spoke of strange patterns in the animal entrails. Some residents noted sulfur in the air. A few said the wine tasted wrong. But in a city that lived in the shadow of the volcano, the shadow itself became invisible. The mountain had always been there, still, massive, ancient, sacred. Vesuvius was not feared. It was myth, and myths, by nature, do not explode. On the morning of August 24th, life moved forward. The baker Terentius lit his ovens early, as he always did. His loaves would later be found still in the oven, charred and perfectly preserved, a reminder of how ordinary the morning had been. The forum echoed with bartering voices. A young woman tried on gold bracelets at a jewelry store. A senator's wife took her bath in the caldarium, warm steam curling around her as she relaxed into tiled stone. In a nearby brothel, laughter and soft commands mingled with the slap of sandals on marble. The artist Aulus was finishing a mural in a merchant's Villa Venus rising from the sea. Eyes open and eternal. Somewhere else, a man sat down to write a letter. Somewhere else, a dog slept, chained in the sun. And then the sound came. At first, it was not a roar. It was a crack, a split, like wood breaking or ice fracturing deep beneath the sea. Then came the shadow, not from clouds, but from ash. A plume of smoke and rock shot 12 miles into the sky. It darkened the sun. It moved like a column with its own will. People stared, Some pointed. A few ran. Most did not. This was something new, something grand, perhaps divine. No one understood that it was the beginning of the end. What followed was not fire, but dust. Fine ash fell like grey snow, coating rooftops, streets, lungs. It did not kill, not yet. It silenced. The city slowed. The markets emptied. Doors slammed. Children were pulled inside. Some families gathered in courtyards, praying. Others climbed to the rooftops to see better. They could not know the ash was only the first act, that the mountain had more to say. From Herculaneum to Stabia, the land began to tremble. Boats unmoored, statues cracked. The air grew thick, hot, metallic. Those with the means began to flee, but too many stayed. Too many waited, because Pompeii had always stood. Because no one believed a mountain could murder. In Rome, hundreds of miles away, the sky dimmed by noon. Pliny the Elder, admiral of the Roman fleet and naturalist, looked to the horizon and saw the rising column. He called for his ships. He wanted to observe. He wanted to rescue. He did not know he was writing his final chapter. In Pompeii, time was running out, but no one could hear the ticking. Beneath their feet, the pressure grew. Above their heads, the sky turned to stone. And in the pause between ash and fire, the city stood still, like a held breath, waiting. It did not stop. The plume thickened, growing taller, wider, darker. 12 miles, then 16. Then more. It loomed like a second mountain, a black pillar crowned with boiling fire. The ash no longer drifted gently. It fell in waves. Roofs sagged. Horses panicked. People choked. Every breath burned the throat, dry and hot and sharp as ground glass. The streets turned grey, then black, then invisible, and still many stayed, not because they wanted to die, but because they didn't know they were dying. Some packed bags, some held onto family relics, some simply knelt in prayer. Others began to flee, but the roads were thick with falling stone and ash, and the sea was no longer safe. Earthquakes rumbled through the soil, each one more violent than the last. Walls cracked, statues collapsed. The gods fell first. By early afternoon, Lapilli began to rain down small rocks, red-hot, hurled from the sky. They struck rooftops like drumbeats, then shattered tiles, then pierced through ceilings. Fires sparked. Screams rose. The marketplace was abandoned. Doors were locked, but ash slipped through every gap. It flowed like fog. It crept beneath the beds of children and filled the mouths of statues. It buried the sun. Some believed it was night already. In the Villa of the Mysteries, a woman and her maid cowered in the wine cellar. They had covered their heads in cloth, wet with water. They clutched jars and prayers. In the temple of Isis, a priest lit incense until the flames sputtered and drowned. A young boy tried to drag his dog with him into a bakery storeroom. The chain around the animal's neck was too short. The boy didn't make it either. Pliny the Elder had launched his ships across the bay. His nephew, the younger Pliny, watched from across the water in Misenum. He would write the only surviving eyewitness account of the day. He described the ashes falling so thick we could no longer see the sun. He described his uncle's courage. He did not yet know he was describing a death. As the hours passed, the weight of ash grew unbearable. Roofs caved in, columns fell sideways. In some villas, people huddled beneath staircases or wrapped themselves in blankets, thinking it would pass. They had no concept of pyroclastic flow. They did not know the mountain could do worse. Just before sunset, it did. A violent explosion ripped through the top of Vesuvius. The plume collapsed. The ash cloud, no longer held aloft, roared downward in a superheated avalanche. It moved faster than sound, faster than wind. A surge of ash, gas, pumice, and death. Nearly 500 sea rushed down the slopes and slammed into Herculaneum. There was no time to flee. Bodies were vaporized in seconds. The wave of fire struck with such force that it left shadows burned into stone. Pompeii was not hit immediately. The wind still favored it, carrying most of the ash east. But the earth groaned louder, the ground cracked, and the sky remained black. Those who had not fled now sealed themselves inside. Some built barricades of furniture. Others gathered coins, jewelry, household gods, trying to preserve meaning in the face of the meaningless. A few scribbled final words on wax tablets. One wrote, "Sodales, the Leet, farewell, friends." In one villa, 6 people sat in silence: an old man, a mother, 2 children, a servant, a dog. They held each other beneath a staircase as the air grew thicker, the light dimmer. In another room, 2 lovers lay side by side, arms wrapped around each other. They did not move again. As night fell, the sea withdrew. Ships cracked against stone. Lightning forked across the ash-filled sky. The earth no longer shook, it heaved. Like something alive, like something dying. The mountain, having devoured Herculaneum, began to turn its gaze back toward Pompeii. There was no warning left to give, only breath. It came in the dark. No stars, no moon, just ash swirling like smoke across the ground, hiding the streets, hiding the sky. Those who still breathed did so through rags and soaked cloth, anything to filter the air. Some had fled by dusk. A few had reached the edge of the city. But the roads were choked, and the sea was no longer water. It had become a mirror to the sky, black, flickering, full of heat. Midnight passed. The tremors did not stop. Dogs howled until their lungs gave out. People whispered, not because they prayed, but because sound itself seemed fragile. Above them, the mountain pulsed. It had already destroyed Herculaneum in fire. Now it waited. And then it moved. At around 6:30 in the morning, just before the sun could rise, Vesuvius unleashed its most violent surge. The column collapsed fully, a pyroclastic flow dense, fast, hotter than anything the people of Pompeii could imagine, raced downhill. It tore through forests, ripped across open fields, and in less than a minute, it reached the northern gates of the city. It did not knock. It smashed. Walls fell before it could touch them. Windows shattered from pressure alone. And then the fire came. It did not burn like a torch. It suffocated. The air itself turned lethal, superheated, filled with fine ash, impossible to inhale. Those who breathed it in died before they could exhale. Their lungs boiled. Their blood stopped moving. Some collapsed mid-step. Some curled into fetal positions. Some still clutched the things they thought mattered: jewelry, coins, keys to doors already lost. Others held nothing at all. In the garden of the fugitives, a group of 13 tried to escape through a side street. They ran together, faces covered, arms shielding children. They fell as one. Their final positions etched into the ash when rediscovered centuries later. Their mouths were still open, but no sound had escaped. Inside homes, people hid in cellars. They believed stone would protect them. It did not. The heat curled iron. Roofs collapsed inward. Furniture turned to cinders. Some died instantly. Others suffocated slowly in rooms that had no more air. In one villa, a man had gathered his household into a wine room, perhaps thinking the thick walls would help. All were found huddled in a corner, mother shielding her child, a servant gripping a bronze lamp that no longer glowed. In the amphitheater, silence reigned. The arena that had once echoed with cheers and bloodshed now stood empty, half buried. Its walls blackened by ash, statues lost their faces, columns wept soot. Even the gods, carved in stone, were blind. And then it stopped, not all at once. The wind shifted, the flow settled, the pressure broke. But the silence that followed was not peace. It was vacancy. Total, perfect vacancy. No birds, no water, no footsteps, only ash, hot, deep, heavy, over rooftops, down streets, into mouths and eyes and dreams, a final layer, sealing what had once been Pompeii. For days, the mountains smoked. For weeks, it hissed. Survivors in nearby towns watched from hillsides, afraid to return. Some did. They searched for family, for valuables, for meaning. But what they found was unrecognizable. Bodies were buried, flattened by stone and time. The smell lingered, sweet and wrong. The colors of Pompeii were gone. The mosaic floors were scorched. The paintings blistered, the gardens burned. And so they left. They walked away. Pompeii disappeared from maps. Its name fell silent. Time passed. Empires fell. Roads were redrawn. The ash grew harder. The world forgot. But the city remained, buried, preserved, waiting. They buried it without meaning to. Not with ceremony, not with memory, just with silence. The survivors, those who escaped before the final surge, looked back once, then turned away. What else could they do? There was no rescue, no rebuilding. Pompeii was not wounded. It was gone. The ash had hardened, like stone, and the city beneath had no voice left to call. In the months that followed, the empire moved on. Rome still ruled. Emperors came and went. Roads were repaired. The trade ports reopened. Other cities absorbed the displaced. Life continued. Because it had to. But Pompeii faded. Even the maps forgot. It became a story told in fragments. The town near the angry mountain. The place where gods had spoken. Herculaneum, too, vanished under hardened mud, deeper, darker, and even harder to find. Some tried to return. Farmers climbed the slopes of Vesuvius looking for fertile land. The volcanic soil, rich and dark, made the vineyards strong. They did not know they were planting over bedrooms. Shepherds led flocks across hills that once were marble streets. The land was quiet now, but the stories never fully died. In the 2nd century, a Roman writer named Dio Cassius described the eruption, writing that many people were suffocated by the dust and fumes and buried in the ruins of their homes. He did not name Pompeii. He called it a city of Campania, a city swallowed, a city unnamed. The shape of forgetting had begun. Centuries passed. Rome itself fell. The empire crumbled. Barbarians came, and new kingdoms rose. Christianity spread. The gods of Pompeii were abandoned, then forbidden. Statues of Venus and Bacchus shattered in the soil. Temples to Apollo were swallowed by vineyards. Earthquakes shook the land. Again and again, as if the ground was trying to remember. But no one listened. By the Middle Ages, no one remembered there had ever been a city there at all. The name Pompeii survived only in church records and broken stones. The mountain loomed still. Vesuvius now considered cursed or holy, depending on who told the tale. Some monks warned of demons inside. Others blessed its ash. But no, one knew that beneath their feet, history was waiting. It wasn't until the 16th century that anything stirred again. A canal project near the Sarno River uncovered pieces of painted walls frescoes that had color, life, and light. Workers unearthed marble, pottery, bricks, but they had no language for what they found. No context, so they buried it again. It would take another 200 years before someone would ask the right question. In 1748, under the rule of Charles III of Spain, excavations began in earnest. At first, the workers believed they were digging through a forgotten Roman villa. But then they found streets, fountains, bodies, whole homes sealed beneath layers of ash. The discoveries stunned the world. They had found not a ruin, but a pause, a city frozen in its final breath. The body's hollow spaces and hardened ash were injected with plaster, revealing the curled forms of mothers, children, even animals, expressions of fear, of silence, of confusion. Not statues, not sculptures, people. Europe reacted with horror and fascination. Artists sketched the walls. Archaeologists flooded the site. Tourists arrived in carriages. Pompeii became myth again, but this time one wrapped in science and spectacle. They called it a mirror to Rome, a ghost city, a preserved scream. And yet, even then, there was something to clean about how they spoke of it. They admired the mosaics, the frescoes, the engineering. They marveled at the wine amphoras still sealed with wax, the graffiti carved on bathhouse walls. But they often forgot the finality of it all. That these were not just things. These were people who died thinking they might still live. Because Pompeii was not destroyed in war, not conquered by men. It was taken by time and stone. And in doing so, it became more than a ruin. It became a question, not of how people lived, but of how they ended, and whether we would have noticed the sky darkening. Too, they opened a city and found a mirror, not of gods, not of emperors, but of people ordinary, vivid. Unfinished, Pompeii did not return to life when it was uncovered, but it began to speak. In mosaics, in loaves of bread still in ovens, in ink on scratched walls. It told the story of a people not caught in tragedy alone, but in rhythm daily, human rhythm. Love, commerce, jealousy, beauty, ambition, appetite, life. Excavators in the 18th and 19th centuries found color. That was the first shock. Roman life had long been imagined in marble grey statues, columns, ruins bleached by time. But Pompeii's walls were crimson, cobalt, gold, frescoes of gods, and myths adorned dining rooms. Bedrooms glowed with erotic scenes. Kitchens held blackened pots and bronze ladles ready to serve. The world that rose from the ash was not sterile. It was intimate. In one home, they found a painting of a woman holding a stylus to her chin. Eyes wide in thought, a portrait that would become famous. She was nameless, yet felt familiar. Somewhere between student and philosopher, her gaze pierced time. In another house, the floor was lined with a mosaic dog and the words cave canem, beware of the dog. It was not a threat. It was humor, domestic. Someone once smiled placing it there. And the graffiti. So much graffiti. On walls, in bathhouses, on temple stones. Jokes, insults, notes of love and lust, pleas to gods, names carved beside names. One read, "I hope your hemorrhoids grow worse," scrawled beside a crude drawing. Another, "Meth loves Crestus may, he never forget it." Another, "I was here, I loved, I left." These were not the words of statues. These were our words. Historians pieced together the lives of bakers, wine sellers, prostitutes, actors, soldiers, slaves. Not just senators and generals. Pompeii gave voice to the forgotten, the unnamed, the fleeting. From the layout of brothels to the residue of spices in kitchen jars. The city whispered how people touched each other, ate, bathed, envied. It gave texture to a world that had once seemed untouchable. And then came the bodies. The first ones were found in strange poses, arms raised, faces turned, mouths open, for decades. They were treated as sculptures, but later, archaeologists realized these were hollow spaces in hardened ash. The bodies had decayed. But the shape remained. They poured plaster inside, and the forms emerged. A curled child, a mother shielding her infant, a man lying face down, arms covering his head, a woman with jewels still clutched in her hand. Death had not erased them. It had sealed them. And we looked. We looked into the eyes of plaster and imagined pain. We looked at the clothes, the hands, the posture, and filled in the silence with our own voices. Were they afraid? Did they have time to cry out? Did they believe they would survive? In one house, the body of a man lies near the exit, just steps from freedom. In another, two lovers lie curled around each other, one arm draped protectively over the other. And in those gestures, there is no empire, no war, no glory. There is only instinct, only love, only the raw finality of being human. Museums displayed the casts, and tourists came by the thousands. Some wept, some took photos, some turned away, because Pompeii did not allow you to remain indifferent. It was too real, too familiar. The faces, the rooms, the beds, they were not distant. They were us, slowed in stone. Artists, writers, philosophers all found themselves haunted by what Pompeii had preserved. Not just a moment of death, but a cross-section of life. It gave flesh to the past. It reminded us that history is not made only in palaces, but in bakeries. That when fire comes, it does not ask your status. It does not care if you are noble or wicked. It only takes, and it takes everyone the same way. And maybe that is why Pompeii remains so powerful, because beneath the scientific wonder, the archaeological precision, the academic curiosity, there is grief, not loud, but persistent, like ash still drifting in the air. The kind of grief that doesn't belong to a single family or a single time, but to us all. Because Pompeii isn't just what happened, it's what was left behind. There is a room in Pompeii where the walls are painted with gardens. Olive trees bend beneath birds mid-flight. Flowers bloom where the real ones burned long ago. The walls are cracked now. Time has faded the colors, but the illusion still holds. You stand in that room, and you are surrounded by life imagined, eternal, untouched by fire. And for a moment, you forget that everyone who once walked here is gone. But they are not gone. They are in the bread left in ovens, in the golden bracelets still clasped around plaster wrists, in the footprints worn into stone floors. They are in the silence between frescoes, in the private jokes carved into bathhouse walls, in the paused conversations, in the frozen gestures. They are in the way the sunlight falls through broken roofs, warming rooms where no one will ever sleep again. Some say Pompeii was a punishment, that the gods grew angry and cast down fire. Others say it was chance, a geological inevitability, a mountain's breath caught too long. But neither story feels complete, because the truth of Pompeii is not in how it ended. It's in how it endures, not just as ruins, but as presence. You walk through its streets, and the dust clings to your shoes. You enter a room, and you feel watched. You stand before a plaster form, and you forget to speak. Because this city is not silent. It listens. It waits. It asks nothing except that you notice. And when you leave, you don't remember the mountain. You remember the boy still reaching for the door, the woman curled near her mirror, the dog chained in the sunlight, the lovers who did not let go. The ash preserved them. But we are the ones who remember, and maybe they knew we would. Every story leaves behind a clue, not just about the past, but about language, too. If you enjoyed this journey through time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories, told in clear English, with subtitles. Thank you, and until next time, keep wondering, keep learning, keep listening.